Hey folks, so this is going to be a quick tutorial video to help some of you guys with using an alphabetical histogram. This is going to be used for pangrams for sure, but we may see something like this later again. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, and you've seen several times how to read from a file, so I'm going to leave that alone. But I've got a string right here that I'm going to use, and I'm going to count all the letters in it. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Yes, it is the song from Mary Poppins. You haven't seen the movie, classic kids movie. But that's what I'm going to read through instead of a file. So just be aware of that difference. Okay, so this is assuming you can read the file, you grab the string, you split it as far as you need to do, and then here we go. So in order to do this, I do need to do a little bit of pre-work. All right, so we're reading, we've got strings. We could read them as char. It just kind of depends on what we want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a char array just called alpha, okay, because it's our alphabet, okay? Now, one of the methods I gave you this week is this. It's really nice. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W. That's not W, W, X, Y, Z. I throw a string in there, and then I say to char array. And so that automatically takes the string and splits it to every single character. And since this is just my alphabet, each one of those is in its own box. In fact, if I want to do a little test condition and see, I can see that that is what actually happens. Okay? All my letters are saved, and they are saved as characters, char. Okay? So just be aware. I'll save that. I may need to print another one later. And I also need to do a counter. So my histogram, okay? So these are going to be integers because they're just counting numbers. I'm just going to call it histogram again. And it's going to be a new integer array of size 26. Take a second to figure out why it's 26. That's right, because there's 26 letters of the alphabet. So each one of these is going to pair up. And so just like before, here, I'll show you both. We'll put them next to each other so that you can see what's happening. All right. These are parallel arrays. These are paired off so that A is counted in index 0, B is counted in index 1, and so forth. Now, the reason why we have to have 2 is because every single element can only hold one data type and one piece of information for now. What we have to do is these are treated together so that we count how many times that specific character, or string in this case, pops up, okay? So these are our default parallel arrays for counting, okay? We have to have the letters to compare them with what we have in our sentence or our string, and we have to have the indexes to count those specific values, okay? Have to understand that part or nothing else I do is going to make a lot of sense, okay? I'll leave those up there as long as I can. In fact, I'll still print them out here, okay? And put a spacer line just so there's no confusion. Okay, so here's our input, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through this and read the line, okay? Now, unlike palindrome, you don't have to get rid of anything, okay? All you're doing is testing, okay? But I'm testing it in two circumstances. So I need to have one element that is reading through this word, the input, and I need to have a second element scanning through my alphabet to find a match. So I've got two cursors moving at the same time, which means I need to have a nested loop situation, okay? Now, because these are arrays, I am going to stick with our classic for loop just because that makes a lot more sense, okay? And because for each is not, well, it's brand new to most of you. So I'm going to leave it alone, but you could do this with a for each. You could do this with a while. It just takes a little more work, okay? So up here, we're going to read through input. Now, now let's see. How simple do I want to make this? Okay, well, here's what we'll do first. So let's make another char array, and we'll call this sentence. And we'll do input.toChar array. Okay, so now they're both in there, and if I need to show y'all just to follow along. Okay. And that error. Okay. All right, so now I got 3 arrays. So I've got my 2 parallel arrays for counting, and then I've got my input that's divided up. If there was punctuation in here, it would not matter. It would still get its own character. If there's spaces, they would get their own element. It's okay. We don't have to manipulate the input. I am setting this to char, but you could do this with strings. Give me a minute and we'll come back to that if we need to. All right. So I've got a for loop. This is going to be going through my input. So I've got sentence dot length. Okay. It's a property, no curly brackets, or no parentheses, excuse me. And it goes up by 1. Okay. For here, this is where I'm scanning alpha. Okay. So I have the same kind of thing, but I have to make sure I use a different variable. J is less than alpha dot length. And J plus plus. Okay. This one scans input, scans alphabet. Okay. That's what's going on so far. All right. Now here's what we have to do. We need to see if we find a match. So we've got a test. Okay. And what we're going to test for is if the 2 characters at that exact same location match. Okay. So we've got sentence, bracket I. Because they're char, we can use the double equals inside of alpha, bracket J. Okay. If that happens, I need to increment my counter. Okay. So my counter is histogram. And then you might be worrying, okay, well, how do I know which one to count? Well, remember that histogram and alpha are parallel arrays. So whatever index I am here is what I am here. And I just increased by 1. That's it, okay? You could argue to put a break or something like that, but as short as this program is going to be, it's not really that necessary, okay? From there, I guess that's pretty much it. If I wanted to, I could make a quick loop. Notice I'm outside the other one. Okay. And okay. And then I could just do a simple print, just like my original histogram. So I grab alpha, bracket I, and then I concatenate histogram, bracket I, times, okay? So if I run this, this will count up how many letters are in each supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and tell us how many times each one was used. You can already tell a lot of I's, okay? So this is how you do an alphabetical histogram, okay? It's still just counting, it's still comparing 2 values, and I hope this helps on pangrams, okay? So now that we've messed with this a little bit, let's talk about alterations you're going to need to double check for. Now, obviously, in this file or in this program, we are not reading from a file. That's going to have an extra loop somewhere. All this information up here can be declared before we ever get into that loop. But inside the loop, we have to reset histogram, okay? Now, histogram is starting at 0, but the thing is I'm checking more than one line. In fact, I think there's like 20 in pangram. So in order to reset it, it's very simple. You just go to histogram, or actually, you can even do that. So arrays.fill, and then you just bracket 0. Resets counters to 0. Okay. Some of y'all asked when to use it. Here's a great place, because I'm going to start counting a new pangram to make sure everything occurs. Okay. Once you get everything here, like where we printed off all the answers, this is where you could do your tests. So remember that a pangram uses every letter of the alphabet. So as long as there's no zeros, you have a pangram. If you have all ones, that's a perfect pangram. And if you find any zeros, then it is a neither. Okay. So I hope this helps and set you on the path. Enjoy. Hey guys, Mr. Joe from the future. As I was editing this, I realized I never went back and talked about how to compare char and string kind of a thing. So I'm going to do that real fast. So have not changed any of the code. This is what you just saw. Characters comparing to characters, stuff like that. Well, let's take this part out. Let's assume I wanted to keep it as a string as I would grab from the file. Well, okay, so, which means I can't print it. Okay, and here we are to our loop. Okay, so what I'm doing is now I'm reading the length. So now that is a method, but it's not sentence anymore, it's input. Okay, now here's where it differs slightly. So I have input, but because it's a string, I need to rip a char out of it briefly. So this would be char at bracket I, or not bracket, parenthesis, okay? So now it grabs that character, turns it into a char, and checks it against our alphabet, okay? Should still do the exact same. Yeah, we still have all those I's. Those were default at the beginning. Okay, yes. So there's that. Sorry, I forgot.